Let me read to you a passage from the 4th chapter of St. Mark's Gospel, verses 35 to 41. It's the Gospel for Saturday of the 3rd week of Ordinary Time. St. Mark writes, "That day when evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, 'Let us go over to the other side.' Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, 'Teacher, do you not care that we drown?' He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, 'Quiet, be still.' Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, 'Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?' They were terrified and asked each other, 'Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him.'" That's from Mark chapter 4, verses 35 to 41. Christ is portrayed as Lord of the world. You know, there is a scholarly position which maintains that the ancient kingdom of Israel, dating, say, from Solomon, was something of a maritime power. Indeed, during the pre-monarchical period, there is evidence that the tribe of Dan was a maritime force. It is stated in Judges chapter 5, verse 17, "Gilead, beyond the Jordan, rests. Why does Dan remain in ships?" Interestingly, Egyptian and Greek sources record that one of the tribes of the Sea Peoples, a sea-raiding people in the eastern Mediterranean at that time, were called the Danauna, or the Danans. In the first book of Kings, chapter 9, verses 26 to 27, it is recorded that King Solomon built a fleet at Ezion-Geber on the Red Sea in the land of Edom. And in the second book of Chronicles, chapter 20, verse 36 to 37, records that Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, built ships to go to Tarshish. The fleet was built at Ezion-Geber, where Solomon had kept his fleet. The project was wrecked by God's act. The ships were wrecked and unable to go. Now the point I'm making is that there is evidence from the scriptures that there was a long tradition of the Hebrews being at home with the sea. I say this in opposition to another view which depicts the Hebrew as profoundly fearful of the sea and as shrinking from contact with it. Well, moving closer to the setting of our Gospel for today, the Sea of Galilee must have, like the rest of the Galilean topography, shaped the culture and sensibilities of the surrounding population. There is on display in the region a restored fishing boat discovered deep in the mud of this inland lake, a boat large and impressive, conjuring up the thriving activity associated with the deep and extensive waters there. One may presume that the people of Galilee loved their inland sea, just as they loved the hills and plains of the region. Doubtlessly there were tragedies and drownings, but for generations beyond memory it resourced a thriving fishing industry and presumably recreational excursions. Among our Lord's 12, there were highly experienced fishermen who knew their sea thoroughly. In our Gospel today we read that, and I quote, "When evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, 'Let us go over to the other side.' Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat." Let us note that it was evening when Jesus and his disciples entered the boat and set out across the sea. It suggests that the disciples knew their sea well and had no apprehensions about travelling across it in the dark although there may have been the light of the full moon, of course, to guide them. Further, it must have seemed that all was perfectly well for a long pull across the lake at night, and our Lord himself quickly fell asleep, exhausted as he was with his unending apostolic labour. There they were, quietly pulling across the water, rising and falling slightly with the ebb and flow of the slight tide. Christ was sound asleep in the stern, his head on a cushion. All was calm, peaceful, with a low murmur of conversation, all anxious to ensure a rest for their beloved and revered Master. But suddenly the environment began to change. A wind unaccountably arose. The waves increased in strength. The boat rocked and heaved the more, and the fishermen, undoubtedly used to changes in the lake, braced themselves for action. But within a short time, let us imagine, say, 15 or 20 minutes, the situation was far, far more serious. In fact, it had become the like of which they had perhaps rarely seen or been caught up in before. The sea was now in a tremendous turmoil. The wind was roaring, and the waves pounding. The boat was awash, and these experienced fishermen were now filled with the utmost alarm. The situation was out of control and absolutely beyond their own excellent capacity. They were facing death at sea, a total loss of ship and life, with their master going down with everything. But he, the master, to their astonishment, slept on in seemingly profound oblivion of the situation around him. In his sleep he showed not the slightest concern. We read that the disciples vigorously woke him and expostulated in their desperation. The rest is described by Mark, which is to say by Peter, whose recollections probably constitute this gospel, and the disciples gaze on as Christ, like the Creator himself at the beginning of Genesis, utters his word. We read that he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down and it was completely calm. Mark chapter 4, verses 35 to 41. Christ spoke to the raging elements, and instantly there was calm. It was an act of the Creator, God become man. Christ showed he was Lord of heaven and of earth, the one in whom we can completely trust. He asks of us faith in him. We read, he said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the winds and the sea obey him." Let us take our stand with him, knowing that whatever be the storms that arise in our life, as we make our way across the sea of life to our homeland, if Christ is with us, all will be well. Let us never be separated from him then.